All right, so today we need to start class at 5:30, so we expect to finish at around so when 15 or possibly right, or maybe around at 7. Okay, because I have to travel back home as well because it could be hard to have a stable internet connection at my home, and I haven't fixed the problem yet. So that's why I have to, find a place where I can get a stable internet connection. So that's why, because of the curfew law, it is important that I have to live at around 7:15, maybe the latest. Okay? I hope that we should have enough time for our discussion within this chapter as well. All right, without further ado, let's jump to the discussion. Okay, and by the way, thank you so much for your, your effort and your contribution, okay, that you have done individually and collectively regarding your summary and your reflection note, and also your answer that you have done collectively with your group members. Okay, so I believe this can be important. It can be useful for all of you, right? That you can capture all of the important points from these chapters. Okay, so now let me jump to the lecture slide. Let me share with you all. Okay, so can you see the screen I share with you all?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so basically, I want to have an interactive lecture. So, but this along the way, so actually I will need your cooperation, right? So, because I already assigned, the question for each group to answer previously. So by this, when we move to that part, before I come to explain each point, I will elicit, answer from, the each group as well, who are responsible for that part. Okay, so hopefully you will cooperate to give the answer, based on your understanding, and make it concise and make it, as make it short, but actually it can be meaningful for us to understand that. Right, but now let's discuss the first chapters of our textbook. We're gonna discuss the development of the modern state, right? So we basically look at what the state is and what the important feature of a state, and basically we also look at some important catalysts and also some important stages of the modern state development, and also we look at the theory of the state that can be useful for us to understand the function of the state, right? Right. So, but this can be the content that we are going to discuss. So, by this, we will define the term state, because state can be the important or the central topic of, for us to understand the politics and also the government work. And also we discussed the three important features of a state. And also we look at the four important stages in the modern state development, right? So what the important aspects, or what the important tasks that need to be done or need to be established in each stage, and also the two important catalysts for the modern state development, right? So basically we look at warfare and the capitalism that facilitate the modern state development. And last but not least, we will talk about some theories, a state theory that can be used to explain, the reason that state has been created and what would be the function of the state that's supposed to do for this society. Okay? All right, so without further ado, we can move to the first part. Okay. All right, so about this, I need help from group one to answer this question. Why do we study state and what is the state? And why has state system come to dominate the international system? Okay? So can anyone from group one share your answer to the class? Okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So regarding the question one, from our reading, state is a form of political organization that establishes internal and external sovereignty and exercise power and legitimacy through established state institutions. The second question, we study states because human activity associated with state in a sense that state provide education, social welfare, security, and economic management. Therefore, human activity is subjected to authority or state. State also has the ability to impose tax, collect tax, set regulation, and enter relation with other states, as well as signing treaty and joining all international organizations. And the third question, the uh, So question, why state has system come to dominate international system? Because the domination of state system in the international system has its root from Europe continent during 30 years war between European great power and like France, Spain, and as well as Central European states. So the end of this war saw the signing of the Treaty of Westphalia or Peace of Westphalia. And in that theory, the concept of sovereignty and non-interference emerged in that theory. As well as there was a arrangement of the established diplomatic relation during the time from now. So the treaty can be the birth of the state system that continue to dominate world politics. Thank you, teacher.
All right. Thank you very much for your very insightful and informative input and contribution for us to understand or to answer this question, right? So basically, you point out that the state can be, the political entities that has the legitimate power to make any kind of authoritative decision on the behalf of the different groups. So basically, you can see that they has the power to issue or enforce any rule or law in order to govern the people within the territory, right? So, but then you can see that state contain, uh, uh, um, important, components that we cannot understand the government work or the political form or political institution without studying state. Right? So state can be the important or it can be the most powerful political actors, right? So in that way, the reason that we study state here, it can be simply because our state can be the central topic for us to understand politics or the government work, and we understand the government form, the government system. We can understand the state institution. We can understand the constitution and also the other political actors who are living within a specific context within a boundary of the under the state control, right? So that's why it is very important for us to study state. And also you answered that our state system become more dominant because this can be based on the past Europeans history that they has like 30-year wars, and you can see that after the end of the 30-year wars, and actually they come up with the state system that can be useful in order to recognize the boundary between state and state, and then it can be used to mark an end of the European state war after 30 years, and then they sign a Westphalia peace treaty, and then you can see that after that the other state see that this can be useful, it can be important in order to recognize the state boundary between state and the other state, and then it can minimize and reduce the interstate war around the world. Right? So that's why you can see that the state system become more dominant. And basically, you can see that because of the term sovereignty here, it talks about the internal and external sovereignty that it can be considered as a legitimate state as long as the other state recognize it. All right, so we will go through all of this question from this part, and hopefully, if you have any question, feel free to raise, and then we can provoke more discussion. But basically, to answer this question, why do we study state? There could be a lot of good reason for us to justify our answer, right? Justify our idea or reason, right? So basically, like what I told you, because state can be the most important or the most powerful actors who has the power to govern the society, right? To govern the people within a territory. So you can see that by this, without studying state, we cannot understand the way the government works, how the state institution work with one another to come up with some sort of political decision, right? And we cannot understand the different form of government, right, without studying state, because different state may have different form of government, right? So by this, in order to understand the different form of government, we need to study state, right? So that's why basically, if we want to understand the political process, the government work, we need to study state, right? And by the way, you can see that the state has what we can say the state claim the monopoly of using physical force, right? So in this way, the state has you can say the supreme power, right? They can have the supreme power in order to decide what could be important for the society, and basically maybe they can use physical force in order to maintain a social order or to secure peace or to avoid anarchy or lawlessness. And then you can see that this can be something important that we look at the way that the state come up with some sort of decision, right? And because of the power, and the politics is about the power, and then we have to study state. But there could be other reason behind it. For example, like the state have the responsibility to protect the people, right? So it can be something important that we can look at. And state have the legitimate power to make decision, to make any kind of public policy or law, right? And state can work in order to adopt any kind of policy to promote the national economics, and state can handle some important, maybe maybe a state can act independent, in order to decide what would be best for the society, especially during the, for example, like economic crisis or during the crisis of the widespread diseases that we have encountered right now, right? So this is something important that we need to look at the state affair, the way that the political organization that control the state. Okay? All right, and now we talk about what is a state, right? So state basically can be in the past we may refer to the political organization that controlled that territory as the city-state, right? Because we talk about the group of political, we talk about the political group who has the power to govern the society, but actually we may look at it a small territory that they control, right? Right now we have, like, for example, like Singapore can be considered as city-state, right? Because it contains a small territory, but actually it can be called state as well. And we have empires, right? That can be a big territory. We have kingdoms, or princedom that have a monarch to control that territory, and we may refer to tribe, right? A group that have a common identity or common values or common culture or language, right? And actually um, they live to within a specific territory, and actually they manage their group affair or activity, right? But lately, you can see that we use the term state to refer to the political organization that control a territory. And okay, sorry, this very little. Hello. Đấy, có là năm này. Okay, sorry, guy, for that. Okay, so by this, let's come to discuss the definition of state. So, state can be the political organization, right? So, we talk about the group who has the political power that can, issue or enforce the binding rule of law to regulate the behavior of people within the territory. So, by this, you can see that there could be some core components that we can use in order to define the term state, right? So, it contains the legitimate government, possibly, right? And we also have the people, we have the territory, and we talk about the powers that given to the the political organization that can make decisions on the behalf of the different group in the society. But we will talk about these component letters. Okay. All right. By the way, there could be some important features that we can use to refers to a state, right? So conventionally, we can look at the concept of state given by Aristotle, and I believe that you have known Aristotle clearly, that he was a great philosopher, and also he was one of the well-known sociologists or political scientists as well, because you can see that he could be one of the the political scientists who try to study the different form of government across the society. So we can say he could be one of the well-known political comparators in the past. Okay, by this, according to Aristotle, he defined the term state as a political community that has the hierarchy that can control the other group and manage the affair for the other groups. Okay? But the question is, how can this political group, has the highest hierarchy that can control the other group within a territory? So the answer can be simply related to the power, right? So without the power, they cannot govern the society. They cannot regulate the behavior of different groups in the society. So by this, we can see that the power can be one of the key characteristics of a state, right? Even though we can see here, power can be the characteristic of a state. It cannot be clear. It cannot be enough for us to, categorize one political organization based on a single characteristic here in terms of power as a state, right? So basically, because it can be very confusing for us if we just solely based on this kind of feature, right? So because within a society or within a territory, there could be different group who can have the power as well. For example, like insurgency group, right? So actually, they can be powerful because they have uh, um, their army force, right? They may have their own groups that equipped with military weapons, right? Or maybe the cattle group, or it can be the mafia group. So actually, they can be powerful in order to make a decision, right? That can be good for their own group. So and then you can see that maybe it can be hard for us to decide, whether this can be called state or not, because we base solely on the power, right, that they have. So that's why we can look at the other element or other features that can be considered as the important statehood, right? But conventionally, we can look at some features of the state, right? So, for example, like national anthem, flag, the army uniform, right? We can also look at the national currency. We may look at the capital of that, of that territory, right? So it can be national capital, for example, like Bangkok, like Phnom Penh, or we may refer to Washington D.C. as the way that we can identify any political organization, right? And also we can use head of state, like the name of the king or the name of the head of the state, okay, in order to refer to any political organization. For example, like the under the administration of the President Obama or something like that. So it can be something that we can refer to the U.S. Government as well, right? By the way, we have other ways in order to consider as the symbol of statehood as well. So basically, you can see traditionally they practice, the exchange of ambassador to recognize the statehood of one another, right? So it means that if both state or both political organization recognize each other as a state, so actually they exchange ambassador, right, in order to build the diplomatic relation. So that's why you can see that they normally have the embassy in in any state that they recognize that state, right? So, but when they, have some sort of bad relation with one another, maybe they suspend the, diplomatic relation, right? They may suspend or withdraw their ambassador, right, to their own country. All right. By the way, do you have any questions so far? Okay. Should be fine, right?
No,
Okay.
sir, yes.
Yes. Okay. If you have any question, like what I told you, feel free to interrupt me. So, because I think I may not have to, hold for any question if, from time to time. So basically, you can interrupt me. Please feel free to do so. Okay? All right. So now let's move to another part, right? That can be something important for us as well. Okay. And this part is covered by group 2. So group 2 is responsible for this part. So maybe I try to get more answer from group 2 and try to engage with group 2, okay, group 2 members. But like what to you, any student from the other group can share your idea or raise any question at any time, right? All right, but anyone from group 2 can help answer this question.
Yes, teacher. So, the first question, what are the three congressional features of the state? So, the three congressional features of the state are territory, people, and sovereignty. And the differences between the internal sovereignty, external sovereignty, legal sovereignty and legitimate sovereignty. And the internal sovereignty, it refers to the supreme authority within one territory in which every state is dependent, and also they have the full capacity to act in its own territory. And for the external sovereignty, it refers to the recognition from the other state as a state. And for the legal sovereignty, it refers to of law in which it bounds over its individuals and association with its final command. And for the last one, legitimate sovereignty, it is the highest power one in the territory which it condition is the people. That's it, Rachel.
All right, thank you so much for the representative from Group 2 that try to provide the, um, explanation to this important point. Right, so we will discuss all of this point all together. So basically, when we talk about the three core feature of states, so basically we can take a look at the territory, the people, and the sovereignty, right? So by this, you can see that the first core feature of a state can be the territory. So it can be referred to the terrain or the geographical areas that belong to a specific group. Okay. So by this, it means that the terrain or the geographical area that they have must be not in dispute with the other state, right? So it can be legitimate, it can belong to their group. Okay, and here you can see that when we talk about the geographical area that they have, so maybe we can look at the the land area, the land territory. They have the water territory or the coastal area, the coastal territory, okay, according to the uh, uh, the domestic law or international law, and also their airspace territory, right? So all of this can be referred to the geographical area or terrains that belong to a specific group that control that territory. And but basically, you can see that those territory, right, or the geographical area that belong to them can be small or big, right? It could be fine, right? So it doesn't matter because to some extent you can see that some state they control a large territory, for example, like Russia, and also some state control just a small territory, for example, like Singapore, they control just only Iceland, or we also have the Vatican City that now gain the state observer status, right? Just only a small city, right? But it can be considered as a territory, right? But it's not enough, okay, that we can just to uh, categorize that territory, one political organization as a state based on just a single feature. So by this, we can look at the second element, right, or the second feature of a state. So we have people, right? So people can be refers to the the different group who live in that territory, right? So it's very important that they have a different group of people who have the some sort of citizenship, that belong to that territory. And here you can see that it could be fine if they have a diverse group who are living in that territory, because it generally it can be natural that we have a dominant group, we have a minority group, or we have cultural group, or we can have a different identity group. So it's really fun, right? Because generally you can see some state can be formed through the what we call the unification, right? So they unify or consolidate the different or you can say the different small territory in order to become a big territory. So by this, there could be a big, a dominant group who control the state, or there could be a minority group that they used to live in that territory. So by this, it should be fine. But basically, you can see that it is important that the state need to work on the nation building activity in order to build a common identity or common language or culture, right? To build a single population, right? That's why you can see that it is important. It can be considered as the fundamental feature of a state, okay, that we have in the second stage of the modern state development, right? All right. By this, we will discuss about this more when we move to the 4 important stages of the modern state development, right? And the third one, like what your friend already mentioned, we talk about the sovereignty, and basically the term sovereignty here, you know, outlines the highest powers that give the state freedom of action, right? So they can act independently within their own territory, so they can make any kind of rule or law, okay, or any policy that they think it is important. The people who are living within that territory, right? By the way, you can see that if we look at the definition of sovereignty here, it should not be clear enough for us to to understand, to categorize one political organization as a state, right? Because to some point, here, just like we have the people, we have the territory, and we have the governments that has the power to make any decision or make any rule or law to govern the behavior of the people, right? Within that territory, but they cannot they cannot be called a state, a legitimate state as well. For example, like Taiwan, right? So Taiwan, have these 3 important features, but they lack something important. That's why we come to specify the meaning of sovereignty. That's why we talk about the term internal sovereignty and external sovereignty. Right, so internal sovereignty within a state, right, within a territory, it means that every state, the political organization that have the legitimate power can act independently, right? So they can make any decision, political decision, on behalf of the other groups. Okay, so actually, they can impose any rule or law in order to regulate the behavior of people, in order to maintain social order or peace, right? So the other state cannot influence their decision, right, or their state affair, right? By the way, you can see that it is also important that we need to have the external sovereignty in order to be called an independent state or legitimate state. So basically, they need to have the recognition from the other state as well. So by this, you can see that if they can be called as the independent state, so I mean that there could be a support from the majority of the other state in the United Nations, right? So they can be the member of the United Nations state, right? By the way, you can see that Taiwan lacks the external sovereignty because China tried to control any intention of Taiwan to be separated themselves as an independent, legitimate state, right? And they lack the recognition from the other state, because there could be a number of states who recognize Taiwan as a legitimate state, but because of the powers and the pressure from China, so there could be a lot of states who are not who are reluctant, to recognize Taiwan, because China is one of the people, so they can use the the veto power in order to reject any intention, for the support of Taiwan to be an independent state. All right. By the way, if we look about the term sovereignty, we talk about the power, right? The power of the state. So the state can act independently, right? They can use the physical force. They can make any kind of political decision. They can impose any rule of law, right? By the way, it does not mean that a state can act can do anything, right? And without any control, right? So basically, we can see that state power can be constrained by the rule or the constitutional law, right? So basically, in the constitution, it states clearly under what condition that state can use for example, like the legitimate power and how they can, make any political decision. So basically, it can be based on the interaction with the other branches of the government, for example, like the legislative body, right? So by this, I mean that the constitution comes to limit the power of the state, but generally you can see that the government now they can be smart enough to play around with the constitution. That's why you can see that they can control the will of the way the other branches of the government come to work, or maybe come to support any kind of policy proposal or any bill or draft law. Okay. So in this way, actually, we will discuss more when we go to the state institution, why the government today tend to be more powerful. But generally, you can see that because of the strong party system, right, that they know how to play around, or they can control the will of their political party members, right? By the way, actually, this can be one way that we can limit the power of the state, but because generally you can see that to avoid the excessive power of the government, especially the executive body. So we have the other branches of the government, for example, like legislative body. We have lower house or upper house, and we may create a strong bicameralism that both house can be equally important, and then they can use the veto power in order to restrict the power of the government, right? So by this, it can be more checks and balances in terms of the power, or we can use the judicial power in order to decide the executive decision or the legislative decision are constitutional or unconstitutional, right? By the way, we also have the international law, right? It means that to some point, if the state tend to use the physical force, okay, in order to control or to maintain their power, and also to control the people, in order to maintain their power and actually just to maximize their own group interests. So basically, we can see that in this context, the state may lose their responsibility to protect the people, right? Maybe especially in the ethnic cleansing, right? During the crimes against humanity, right? Or it can be a criminal war, or it can be the genocidal activities of a state, right? So then this responsibility to protect, it means that the way in which that the state have the monopoly of legitimate use of physical force in order to work on those important matters can be shifted to the international community. So international community can use military intervention to protect the civilian people, right? For example, like right now in the case of Myanmar, right? Because of the military government use physical force in order to control the territory, try to maintain their power, and then to some extent you can see that they use some sort of crimes against humanity, or it can be the criminal wars, right? So we talk about the responsibility of to protect that should be shift to the international community. But the problem is that in order to give the responsibility to protect to the international community, especially the United Nations, it is important that the United Nations Security Council member, the P5, must collectively agree with one another. They need to reach a consensus, right, in order to use military intervention. That's why it creates another problem in the international politics as well, because generally you can see that P5 is always the P5 are almost always divided, right? So they rarely reach a collective consensus because they try to, control their interest, right? They try to generate their interest from that as well. Okay, but by the way, we can see that this can be part of the way that we can see that we can use to control the power of the state, especially when they use when we talk about the state that claim the monopoly of legitimate use of physical force, right? Okay, moving on, we can see that Max Weber, who tried to specify the meaning of sovereignty as well, because so far you can see that it's not clear who's supposed to, have the legitimate power, right? Who's supposed to control the legitimate use of physical force, right? So it's not clear for us. That's why Max Weber tried to specify the meaning of sovereignty and try to talk about who's supposed to claim the monopoly of legitimate use of physical force. Okay, and Max Weber, he is the German social and political scientist, right? So he contributed a lot to the field of sociology and also the political science. Right, and by this you can see that Max Weber accepts the three conventional features of a state in terms of territory, people, and sovereignty. However, he tried to specify the meaning of sovereignty, right, by looking at the distinction between legal and legitimate sovereignty. So legal sovereignty, it means that the way in which that the physical force can be exercised, can be used based on the law, based on the constitution, right? So the constitution states clearly under what condition that the state can use the physical force, right? Maybe that it states clearly that in the event that the other state come to violate their sovereignty. That's why in the constitution you can see that there could be the first chapter of the constitution normally talk about the sovereignty, right? So it states clearly about the power of the state, right? So when the state can use their physical force, okay? And at the same time you can see that under what condition that the state can have some sort of approval from the other branches of the government in order to use the physical force, right? So basically, you can see that they need to get the support from the legislators, right? It can be lower house or the upper house, or without any kind of judicial review to claim that the decision of using force can be unconstitutional, right? If the use of force can be can reflect the interest and the will of the people, so actually it can be constitutional, right? Or we may have like the king institution, right? Maybe the state head of state that declare the war with the other state, right? For example, like in the parliamentary system, we have the different people who assume two different roles. One can be the head of state and one can be the head of the government. So this can be based on the law that state clearly under what condition, right? That the physical force can be used, right? By the way, you can see that, like what I told you, the government nowadays tend to be powerful. They are very smart in order to play around with the constitution, right? Because generally they can control the bill or the work of the legislator. Because generally you can see that the legislator are normally from the the same party. Um, um, the same party to the head of the government, right? The the um, from the leader of the executive branch of government. So in that way, you can see that they can manipulate, right? So the head of the government or I can say the chief of government can control the will or the decision of the legislator, right? So that's why you can see that they can vote of confidence that allows the government to use physical force, right, in order to serve the interests of the head of the government possibly. So that's why we try to talk about the legitimate sovereignty, that the use of force can be based on the legitimate sovereignty. I mean that it can be based on the consent of the people, right? So it means that people can view the use of force can be legitimate, right? It can be morally right. Okay, by this you can see that according to Max Weber, he tried to point out that it is very important that a state should be the only political groups, okay, that claim the monopoly of the legitimate use of force, right? Because otherwise you can see that within a society there could be different groups who may uh, uh, have the power as well, right? So because they may have their own group that can be equipped with military response and control the people who are living that territory that they control, right? So that's why you can see that maybe it can possibly lead to the anarchy, right? Lawlessness, right? So that's why the state, in that condition, state should claim the monopoly of legitimate use of force in order to protect the internal enemy and external enemy, right? And the other group, for example, like the mass fear group or insurgency group or the drug cartel group or any terrorist group, should not have the the legitimate use of physical force, right? So if they have the force, okay, and if they use military force, it can be considered as illegitimate, and the government have the responsibility to protect the people, and they need to, use physical force to break down those groups. Okay, right. So by this, it's very clear that, according to Max Weber, he tried to point out the legitimate government, right, the state institution that control the monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force in order to avoid the dangers and the danger of anarchy or lawlessness, right? To maintain social order, to maintain national unity or peace, right? All right. So by this, from now we can it can be clear for us, right, to look at the core feature of the state, right, in terms of territory, people, the internal sovereignty and external sovereignty. And also we can understand that the use of physical force can be based on legal and legitimate sovereignty, right? All right, so do you have any question from this part?
No, sir, no.
Okay. Okay, so let's move on to the next part. So I would like to elicit an answer from group 3. So would you please briefly explain the 4 stages of the modern state development?
Yeah, sure. For the 4 stages in the development of the modern state include state formation that refer to the government and the institutional system that is built to provide addressing to internal concern, to provide external security as armed force and diplomatic service, and to extract resource through through the tech and the tools. And the last one, to improve communication, road and bridge for mostly for the military purpose. And the second stage is the nation building, that emphasize on the cultural issue of the common language, religious differences, and compulsory education. And the third one, mass democracy, uh, is referred to the equality of the individual or the group to participate in governmental decision making that are based on the democracy standard. And the last one is focused on the welfare of the state. State play an important role to create a policy to strengthen economic solidarity between the different part of the population by providing a public welfare program to the vulnerable one. So that's all, teacher.
All right, thank you so much for three, right? That contribute your contribute to the understanding of this part. Okay, so basically you can see that when we talk about the 4 stages in the modern state development, so you can see that there could be one of the prominent scholar, okay, Sten Rocken. He is the Norwegian political scientist, okay, that focus on the process of the modern state development. And from his work, you can see that he outlines the 4 important stages that all the state, may go through. Okay, so basically, state formation and national building, and the third and the last phase can be mass democracy and welfare states. All right, so the first 2 stages can be done through by the political leader, right? So you can see that if we look at the every state, you can see that this can be the fundamental and also the universal structure, right? Because every state must go through these 2 stages in terms of state formation and national building, right? And it can be a never-ending process, right? In terms of the state formation that focus on the gradual political reform regarding the state institution, right? And also the national building, or that they need to work gradually in order to build a common identity, common culture, common language, and to build a strong sense of nationalism for the different group in the society, right? So because this can be useful in order to build or to spread some sort of ideologies to the younger generation as well. So that's why I can say that these 2 stages can be the never-ending process, right? Can be a long-term process. However, the last 2 stages cannot be guaranteed that every state can have, right? For example, like some state cannot advance to mass democracy, right? Because they try to control the power of the state and try to restrict the social and individual, and especially the political right of an individual, so they cannot allows a larger degree for people to participate in politics, so they cannot arrive at the third stage, right, like mass democracy or welfare state. So by this you can see that could be based on the internal restructuring. I mean, it can be based on the masses. I mean, the public who struggle in order to demand for the political right, especially in the third stage, right? And in the 4th stage, maybe the people can be more demanding, especially for the social security protection policy, right? That's the state are supposed to provide some sort of subsidy to support the people. Right? But we will look at this stage one by one, right? So what could be the important tasks that each state must or supposed to work on, right, in order to develop into a modern state, right? Right. So the first stage can be the state formation or penetration. So it means that we talk about the state development, right? So what could be the important element of the state formation in the first stage? Right. So in the first stage or in the early stage, you can see that the political elite, right? You can see from the past history, the political leader, took a lead in order to unify, right, or to consolidate the different small territory into become a big territory, right? So by this, you can see that based on the base of the central elite, in order to integrate the different territory into a big territory. So especially you can see between the urban area and the rural area or the poor area. So basically, they need to build some sort of state institution, right? So in order to secure the compliances within the territory, right, after the consolidation, so the state institution will be, right? So basically, you can see that all of these state institutions can be found in any state, right? For example, like the police institution that they can they can be established in order to ensure the internal order, right? Internal order and provide social security for the people, right? To protect any internal enemy, right? To maintain social order. So by this, we have the police institution, and we have courts, right? In order to regulate any kind of conflict or disputes, right, among different groups. So we create a legal system, right? And also we have the armed force institution. We have a Ministry of Defense, right? So in order to provide the external security against any or the other state who wish to invade their territory or sovereignty, right? So by this, it is the fundamental, or it can be the universal a structure of a state that we can find in any state. And also diplomatic services, right? So they build the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, right? So in order to promote diplomatic relation, right, among the other state. And also they may create, or they create some sort of Ministry of economics and finance, right, in order to work on the national economies, right, to promote the national economic system, right, and they also collect tax from the individual from within that territory, right? So by this, they can use those resources in order to manage the state affair regarding the way in which that it can be important for the people within that territory, right? Or also they can use those resources in order to develop a social and physical infrastructure. But basically, in the past, you can see that it can be based on the military reason. Right, so all of this can be very important. That you can see that there could be some other state institution that can be built later in order to respond to the need of the people as well. Okay? But at the same time, you can see that in the second stage, okay, it also very important as well that you can see that because within a territory there could be different groups, okay, who are living within that territory. You can see because of colonialism, right? Because of the war and the war legacy, right? That there could be different groups or minority groups, or there could be cultural group or identity groups uh, who are living within a territory, right? So, but this it is very important, after the unification or after the consolidation of their territory. So basically, the political leader work on the nation building activity, right? So I mean that they try to build a single population, right? That they share a common identity, common language, common culture, or you can see that they build a strong sense of loyalty to the state, right? So, but this you can see that it can be considered as something fundamental, something universal, that we can see that every state must go through these two important stages, right? The first stage and the second stage, right? So, if I ask you guys to point out any state that didn't work on the state formation and nation building, it could be impossible, right? So because this can be universal, it can be fundamental, and generally you can see that the political leader play a role in order to take a lead in order to build this two important function, or to build as a core structure of the state. Right, but generally you can see here this can be based on the source power, right? The single population can be built through the source power. I mean, education, right? Education can be the key in order to promote a common identity, right? Common culture, common language, and to promote, the peaceful coexistence amongst the different groups within a society, right? Okay, however, when we talk about the third stage of the modern state development, so we talk about the mass democracy, equalization. So basically, it means that in this stage, it was not done by the political elite any longer, right? So actually, you can see that that's why there could be some state that cannot advance to this stage, right? For example, like the authoritarian state or communist states, right? Like China or like Vietnam, right? So actually, they cannot advance to this stage, right? So by this, there could be some sort of restriction, right, toward the political rights of the people. All right. So by this, you can see that in this stage, we focus on the equalization, right? Regarding the social, economic, and political rights. So basically, because of the demand, right? Because of the demand from the people to participate in the government decision-making process. So basically, you can see that they demand for the political rights, right? They want to participate in the government work. So they want to have the political right to vote, okay, in order to choose any political leader that can work best for the society. So in that way, because of this, because of the great demand from the people, so you can see that there could be some state, um, transform themselves into democratic state, right? So I mean that democracy can be created as the new government form or it can be the political government forms that provides more political rights for the people in order to participate. So in this state, you can see that if they advance to the mass democracy, it means that the political party can be allowed to uh, compete for public office, right? So the peaceful opposition to the government could be considered as legitimate, right? As long as they compete for public office peacefully, right? So actually through the election. So this it could be legitimate, right? By the way, you can see that in the early stage, there could be some sort of political there could be some sort of restriction toward the political rights toward the different group who are living in this in different society as well. You can see, for example, like the restriction of the political rights of the black men, right? Black men cannot participate in government, and also women cannot participate in the politics as well. They could not vote, right? So, by the way, after the gradual reform, especially the democratization, right now it's pretty much better than before, right? And then there could be some sort of equality of the political opportunity among different groups in many society, right? Okay. By the way, if they you can see that if they experience the the what we call the economic condition, especially during the second stage, and if they work on the democratic value, democratic practice in the third stage, so maybe people can be more active. They can be um, how I mean they can be more demanding, okay, in the way that they want the government to work on the policy that can, reduce the um, inequality, right, between the rich and the poor, and especially to provide the equality of the social, economic, and political opportunity among the different part of the population, right? So by this, it requires the government to produce some sort of social security protection policy, right? That the government, are supposed to provide the, economic or support, especially the economic subsidies to the poor people or the under privileged people, or it can be given to the disabled or the patient, the young people, or it can be the senior people, right? So actually, this can be related to the policy of the state, right? So in that way, when we talk in this way, when we talk about the welfare state, we look at the policy of the state that they work on the social security protection policy, right? And by this, I mean that it can be the responsibility of the state that they can use the national resources in order to support the underprivileged or the poor people, right? To get access to the equality, right? The equality of the social, economic, and also political opportunity. I would like to remind you that in our textbook we focus on the modern state, right? So by this I mean that we focus about the modern welfare state. So when we talk about the modern welfare state, we include the political opportunity as well, right? So by this I mean that it's supposed to be democratic states, right? That they work on the social welfare program or social welfare policy, right? Can be considered as a welfare state, right? Modern welfare state. By the way, but we can see that there could be some non-democratic state that emphasize the welfare policy program for the people as well. But in this context, we can say that they can be the non-democratic welfare state, right? So we need to use another term, right? Because don't be confused that if we focus on the welfare state, so uh, it can be it can include the non-democratic state, right? So actually, we try to make a clear separation between the non-democratic state and the modern welfare state. So modern welfare state includes the uh, the equality of political opportunity, and that's why there could be one statement try to claim that all welfare state can be democracy, but not democracy can be a welfare state, right? Because generally you can see that the modern welfare state here advance or transform from the the democratic state in the third stage, right? Okay, by the way, you can see here when we categorize one state as the modern welfare state, we focus on the redistribution of resources and we focus on the equality of the social, economic, and political opportunity. Right? So by this, it's important that we can look at the way that the government treat people fairly, right, among the different part of the population, and try to reduce the inequality between the rich and the poor, and try to ensure that the poor and the underprivileged can get access to the same quality of, for example, like educational opportunity, right? So they can get a free access to education with the same quality, right? Again, I would like to stress on the word same quality, right? It means that they can get the access to the education, healthcare, like the rich people as well. Okay, okay. And a nation, we talk about the way in which that the government try to reduce the gap in terms of social and physical infrastructure developments nationwide as well. So between the urban area and rural area, you can see that if we look at the education bridge, right? I mean the school, the bridge, the roads can be very similar in terms of social and physical infrastructure. And if we talk about the way that we get access to the healthcare system, so actually you can see that the rich and the poor go to the same place, not create different blocks, right? Not create different areas that they can get access to, those services, right? Okay. By the way, you can see here not only not all state can advance to this stage, right? Because if we discuss about the welfare state, it requires the national spending, right? The national spendings that used to support the social security protection policy, right? So it requires a lot of resources, okay? And if if the rich states, maybe if we talk about this, I mean that I can say that rich state can afford, right, to work on the social security protection policy. So you can see, for example, like the modern welfare state, Scandinavian country. Actually, you can see that they spend, around 30 percent, or at least 20% of the total amount of their GDP, right, to cover the social security protection policy, right? So you can see it's a lot of resources that they need to have, right? By this, you can see that because of the national spending can be vary from one context to another, so it can be very difficult or even impossible for the poor state or the least developed state in order to work on this ambitious social welfare program of the state, right? All right. By the way, you can see that not all states can advance to the last stage, right? Because it tends to be very idealistic, right? It can be very ambitious, or the state that can, fulfill the need for the people, and because they need to have enough resources. Okay? But by the way, you can see that we can say that as long as they have a political commitment, and then maybe they can work well with the third stage if they can build the a good state institution that work based on good governance, and they can reduce the corruption, and then they may have enough resources in order to work on the social welfare program policy over time, and then they may arrive at welfare state in the future. Right? By the way, you can see that here the four stages can be interrupted by revolution, war, or the colonialism of imperialism, right? So by this, it can be hard for us to say when or how long do we need to spend for a very specific stage, right? For example, like 5 years, we can arrive at the second stage, and we use another 5 years to arrive at the third stage, and we can use another 5 years to advance to the last stage. So it does not mean like that. So basically, you can see that it can be vary from one context to another, right? Because of the the resources, because of the commitment, and because of some sort of other social and political condition that come to intervene or interrupt their development process, right? Okay, so do you have any question here? Okay, so now I can move on to the next part. So, Group 4, can you explain the two catalysts of the modern state?
Yeah, so the there are two main catalysts of the modern state formation, which are warfare and capitalism. Because state seek for the secure their territory, and the main subject to secure their territory is military. So only states were capable to coordinate and pay with a large amount for the enemy and the war that they fight, because they were struggling for domination of territory for the century of European history. And the second one is capitalism. So the rise of capitalism, which appeared during the 18th and 19th century, that introduced state to two important factors, which are labor and capital. And for the creation to produce product in order to sell in the market to earn a profit. But to reduce the process of capitalism, it also depends heavily on infrastructure as well as the police to ensure the security and other legal system to stabilize the flow in the market. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the Group 4 representative that try to provide an input for us to understand that. So basically, you can see that the warfare and capitalism, right? That the demand of war and profit certainly threaten the formation of the creation of the modern state, right? So basically, if we look at the warfare factors, so based on the wish of the political elite in order to secure the compliance within their territory, so actually you can see that they need to build the state institution, right? And mostly you can see that those state institutions at the early stage work in order to support the military region, right? In order to support the military power, to military activity, right? So basically, you can see that because of the need of the state institution in order to manage the resources, in order to support the large army and also the warfare activity. So basically, you can see that the state institutions were built, right, in order to protect the internal and external enemy, right? So this can be one of the catalysts that led to the creation of the state. And moreover, you can see that the persistent involvement in war, right, and long-term struggle for the domination, especially you can see that regarding the colonialism policy and imperialism policy of the European states, facilitate the creation of the state, the modern state, right, especially the state institutions that work to support the warfare activities. Okay? By the way, you can see that another important catalyst that we can use to discuss the modern state creation can be capitalism, right? So basically, because of the rise of capitalism in the 18th and 19th century, facilitate the creation of the modern state. And basically, you can see here because of the rise of the capitalism, you can see that it led to the important factors, okay, in terms of labor, skill, and capital protection, right? So by this, you can see that the capitalist group want to have want a state agency, right, to manage this important affair in order to improve their profit and also their mass production, right? So by this, you can see that they need a state agency in order to perform some important tasks for them. Especially, you can see that to secure investment, right? To provide social and physical infrastructure, and to regulate the conflict among different groups in the society. and also to protect the interest of capitalist group, especially against the competition from abroad. And then you can see that they need state to adopt the mercantilism policy, right? And by this you can see that they fund, right? They fund the political leader in order to develop the state institution, basically. So it means that because they need the state institution in order to support their to work or to fulfill this important task, right? And basically because the institution to perform this function can be state, right? So then you can see that a state create the different state institution, right, in order to manage this affair for the capitalist group as well. That's why you can see, according to Marxists, they try to argue that state can be created as a tool in order to to adopt any policy to favor the capitalist group. All right, so now let's go to the state theory. Basically, you can see that that could be two important, theories that can be used to explain the political phenomena, right? We have the normative political theory and empirical political theories, right? So when we talk about normative political theory, we look at the normative, talk about the value judgment, right? It can be based on subjective judgment. So it can be based on the individual perception, whether something right or wrong, something good or bad, moral or immoral, whether something are supposed to be in that way or supposed not to be in that way, right? So it can be based on value judgment. But if we based on the empirical political theory, so actually we try to look at the the political outcome, right? So based on the real practice of politics, so we try to explain or the political phenomenon based on the factual information, or it can be based on the empirical evidence, or it can be based on the statistical data. So it means that we look at how the politics can be done based on the real practice of politics. So it means that they try to be as scientific as possible. That's why you can see that they try to compare the different practice of the political activity in different contexts, and before they come up with a conclusion, or they come up with an explanation of any political phenomena. Okay, and by this you can see that in these chapters we try to explain about the state function, right? The reason that we create state and the function of the state. And generally, you can see that there could be a lot of theory that used to explain the creation of state and the function of the state. By the way, you can see that there could be four important approaches, right? In terms of constitutional approaches, physical and moral approaches that can be more related to the normative political theory, and we have complex approaches and pluralist approaches that can be based more on the empirical political theory, right? So basically, you can see that we can explain the political phenomenon based on the normative and empirical political theory. By the way, we can categorize the state theory based on these four approaches. And by this we can understand the reason that a state has been created, and also the function of the state, right? All right, so by this we will look at the constitutional approaches, and this can be useful for us to understand why state has been created and what would be the function that state is supposed to do. All right, so can Rufai briefly explain this approach?
Yes, sir. So according to the constitutional approach, the state is created by some sort of social contract between the citizens and the rulers, or we can call the government, and it defines the task and function of the state and the power of the government. That's all.
Right, thank you so much. generally you can see that the state can be established by some agreement or social contracts, right? But however, you can see in the past it's not like the contracts not the contracts or the agreement is not like the agreement between the seller or buyer, right? So actually, it was not written down, right? But maybe there could be some sort of interaction between ruler and the people, right? So that the ruler come to promise and try to convince the people to support any ruler in order to govern the society, right? By this, you can see that to some point, it can be abstract, right? It can be hard to ensure the legitimacy of the government, right, in order to govern the people based on the the will and the interest of the people, right? So that's why you can see that letters. You can see that it can be more consistent, right? Because there could be a constitutional design that try to that can be used to ensure that about the power of the state and also to discuss about the, the protection of the people rights, right? Also discuss about the function and the duty and the responsibility of the state and also each state institution supposed to do what, right? So but you can see that it can be more consistent, that you can understand that the state should be created in order to manage the affair of the state and also to serve the interests of the people. And actually, it should be function based on the constitution, right? So by this, you can see that there could be constitutional law, right? Every state has a constitutional law because it is very important to ensure the legitimacy of the government. The government is supposed to do something important for the society. Okay, and by the way, we have ethical and moral approaches. So, Group C, can you briefly explain this approach?
Okay, teacher. So this it stressed on how society can organize so that individuals can live together peacefully. It also takes the view that society consists of individuals who should be free as possible, and also view that society as a collective entity, with to ensure the collective well-being of its citizens. And
all right, thank you so much. Right, you are right. So, from this approach, you can see that it try to explain that state should be created as a collective entity that serve the interests of the um, collective well-being of the people, right? So, state supposed to, fulfill some important value based on ethical and moral values. Okay, so by this, a state supposed to provide any kind of freedoms and right to the people, and actually, state need to serve the interests of the people in order to ensure that the basic need of the people can be fulfilled or can be protected by the state, right? And this can be explained through the religious theory that a state supposed to be the God will, right? That try to fulfill the need and the interest of the people. Right? So in that way, it can be ethical, it can be moral. That state supposed to protect the people. The state supposed to fulfill the need of the needs of the people in the society. Right? Okay, and moving from this, we have conflict approaches. Okay, so can anyone from Group 7 try to explain this one?
Approach are the theory that can be explained of the conflicting natures of interest and also the value of society and these conflicts. And a state is the main actors to regulate these conflicts. And Marxist can be the example of this conflict approach. Like there is the conflicts between the owner of production and the working class, and also the conflicts as capitalists, uh, like they want to control all the classes in order to secure their own interests. And furthermore, the feminist theories are also similar to these aspects of class theory, but they view the word differently. Like there are different between the men and women. Men tend to control the state to dominant women, and this could lead to the women liberalization.
Okay, thank you so much. The representative from Group 7 who try to explain this complex, try to explain the function of the state through the complex approaches. Right, so you are right. So basically, you can see that according to this theory, try to view that in the society, in any society, there could be a structural tension, right? So by this, you can see that it is natural, it is inevitable that different groups have different interests, different values, right? So but this, it is important to have um, a political entities that can have the legitimate power in order to reconcile the differences, in order to make any decision on behalf of different groups, and can decide what could be important for the society, right? So by this, you can see that based on that, state can be created as a tool in order to exercise power, right? In order to to regulate those conflict, and can decide on behalf of the people, right? Or on behalf of the different group in the society. However, you can see that based on this approach as well, you can see according to Marxist theory or class theory, you can see that the state can be created as a tool in order to, in order to, um, you know, uh, to give some sort of favors to the capitalist group, right? Because you can see, according to Marxist, try to argue all the state affair just only to favor the capitalist group. For example, like the social and physical infrastructure development. So state do so because actually to promote the mass production of the capitalist group, right? And to provide some sort of education to a state, work on education in order to provide labor skill that can be important for the mass production of the capitalist group, right? Or the state, use religions in order to justify, poverty that can be or maintain the status quo, or to maintain the private ownership of the capitalist group to avoid some sort of revolution. So what you can see that from Marxist perspective, you can see that all the state activity can be based on the interest of the capitalist group. And then that's why you can see that state is nothing other than the tool that property owners, try to maintain their power. The capitalists will try to maintain their powers. Right? But at the same time, you can see another theory from the feminist perspective. You can see that it's very similar to the class theory, that state can be created in order to favor a specific group. And especially you can see here, it can be used by means in order to control being, right? And this can be true, right? In the past, that even you can see that some state, allows the political rights for, means to participate in the government decision-making process, but they try to restrict the political right of the women, right? Just until now, right? That because of the democratization, right? So actually, women now can participate in political decision. They can vote. They can be a political candidate in order to compete for public office as well, right? But it's still true in some society that there could be some sort of restriction in terms of social and economic, social and political opportunity as well. Okay? All right, so now let's move to the last approaches. So in terms of pluralist approaches, so Can anyone from group 8 explain this one?
Thank you, Cha. For pluralist approach, it will use state as the main instrument for the regulation of conflicts and the reconciliation of competing interests. By this, it means that state consists of many different kinds of interests and many different kinds of group of people, so that state need to use its legitimate authority in order to make sure that those interests of all groups are treated reasonably fairly. And this is all from me, Cha.
All right, thank you so much. So in this approach, it's not so much different from the class theory. So try to argue that a state can be designed or can be established in order to regulate the structural tension among different groups in the society. So state play a very important role to make some sort of a coordination role or facilitation role or regulate the conflict among different groups, right? To adjust the differences, to reconcile the differences. So in this theory, it means that the state can be very similar to the conflict approach as well. However, the difference is the state is supposed to be a third neutral party that the state is supposed to produce any policy that can favor the free and fair competition among the different groups in society. So the state's supposed to be neutral, and actually they cannot take side or they cannot favor any group in society. Right? So that's why you can see that it can be true, right, in some society as well, that states are supposed to be a third neutral party, and actually you can see state do not interfere in the economics sphere, economics or market competition, right? So they allow different groups to compete with one another, because by doing so, you can see that the different group in the society can benefit from the free and fair competition in the market sphere, right? For example, like they allows the competition for the quality of the products, right? They allow the competition for the reasonable price of the product that can be given or can be sold to the consumer, and consumer can get good quality of products and they can buy that product within a reasonable price, or maybe in terms of the service that they can get from the competition as well. So but you can see that everyone in that society can benefit all, right? Okay, we come to an end. So if you have any question, you can raise now, and then we can discuss more about any point that is not clear for anyone. Okay, so do you have any question?
For me, no, Cha.
Okay. So if you don't have any question, I would like to end this meeting. Thank you so much, okay, for your attention and cooperation. Okay, by the way, you have to do the similar thing, right? That you have to summarize the chapter 2 and write a reflection, short reflection on that, and also maybe you have to work collectively. I will post any question like 1 or 2 days before the class start, right? And then you have to share those ideas in class, right, as well. Okay. All right. So again, thank you so much, and stay safe. Okay, for those who are who are who are now who are now outside of your house, so you need to manage to go home as well. Okay, so because at 8 o'clock you are not allowed to travel, right? So now please make sure that you are at home, right? And I have to go home as well. Thank you so much, guys. See you guys. Bye bye.
Teacher, I have a question. Teacher.
Yes, yes.
One quick question about case study presentation. Group 1 will be presenting on 7 next month, right?
No. So make sure that this is a big one, right? Oh, big two. So you can follow that. So we have two more bigs. So, but this is not. I can check. The group one supposed to be.
Teacher, we have holiday on 16 and 30 on your class.
Sorry, I cannot hear you. So question again, please.
Okay, when will group one be presenting our case study presentation? Exact date, so we can prepare now because there are many holidays from now on.
Make sure that it is in big five, right? So if we go to the big five based on what we discussed, so actually, it will be the group one turn, right? So, but basically now it's group weeks two, right? And with our mega plus, maybe we will follow the schedule, right? But I don't know whether we have holiday right on 16, right? So by this maybe 3, 4, maybe on 13 of April, right? Possibly. But you need to be well prepared, right? So you have enough time to do it now. Okay, any other question or concern?
Chair, also a quick question.
Yes.
What about attendance, Chair? Like.
Oh, actually, because I forgot to bring the list. So actually, I already download the attendance list. So actually, I can check based on that, right?
Okay,
so maybe
sure.
I just get it based on that. But actually, next time I will quickly check it like twice during the our discussion. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other question?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you so much again. Okay, have a good dinner and have a productive weekend. Goodbye.
Goodbye,
Goodbye,
teacher.
teacher.
Stay safe. Bye.